Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Karen Ivy from the Forbes School of Business and Technology. I would like to say welcome again to another presentation put on by the Forbes School of Business and Technology faculty members. This week, during the month of September, we are focusing on leadership. And we have a lot of different subjects we're bringing to you focused on leadership. Either you're in a leadership position, you are targeting to move into a leadership position, or even the best way of how to interface with your leadership within the organization. Well, today we have a very dynamic faculty member, Dr. Alan Swank, who will present for us. And I want to give you some background on Dr. Swank. Dr. Swank will present to you on the subject of power dynamics. So, Dr. Alan Swank is one of our associate professors for the Ford School of Business and Technology, and he teaches in leadership management as well as human resources. Dr. Swank has a plethora of experience and expertise within the academic arena, which we tap into quite often inside of Forbes School of Business and Technology for process changes and various directions that we have important within the organization. Dr. Swank has more than 23 years also of small business ownership expertise. He owned and operated a small manufacturing firm and has taught machine tool technology and welding at a vocational rehabilitation facility, and also was an active duty member of the United States Air Force for 8 years. And Dr. Swank, we thank you for your service to our country. Well, what does Dr. Allen like to do in his spare time? He loves to travel. Technology allows him to visit some of the most beautiful places in the country as he continues to teach. And so, without any further time, we would like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Alan Swank, who will present on power dynamics. Dr. Swank, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ivy. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me to speak today about the topic of power dynamics. So, why do we care about power? How does this relate to leadership? That's one of the first topics we're going to discuss. We're going to define power. We're going to discuss a brief history of social power, and we're going to discuss sources of power and why is this important. So, why do we care about power? What does it have to do with leadership? Well, power and leadership work hand in hand. When you're a follower, you want to know why you're following somebody. And if you're a leader, you want to know why you're able to lead these people, why the use of power, or through the use of power, what type of appropriate power to use to help guide people to do what you need them to do. So, power is the potential to influence. Real simple. Influence is a person's ability to affect or change the actions, behaviors, and opinions of others in desired ways. A lot of people get really uncomfortable when we start talking about power. For some reason in the United States, power is equated to an evil topic, an unethical topic, that it seems like it's unethical to wield power and to use it. But the actual definition of power does not show anything about ethics at all. It is ethically neutral. Power is an activity. So the use of power, whether it's ethical or unethical, is totally up to the user of the power. It's the same as with leadership. The term leadership or leader is also ethically neutral. A leader guides somebody. That's the basic definition. They guide people along the way. And the term leadership does not provide any ethical guidance whatsoever. It is ethically neutral. So it is up to the individual to determine if they're going to be ethical or unethical. give you a little history about leadership ethics and why we consider leadership. Leaders in this country are often considered to be ethical. We think that leaders will have our best interests at heart. And why is this? Well, if we go back to the founders of our country and the writing of the Constitution, these people came out of Europe for the most part. Their influence came out of Europe. And Europe in those days had a lot of unethical, tyrannical leaders. You had different fiefdoms and kingdoms and Christendom and all of these activities that went on that had tyrannical leaders that caused great harm to the follower population. Now along comes World War II. And the United States, we go in, we do our duty, we win the war, and we have all of these World War II heroes. So all of a sudden, these are considered highly ethical leaders. And so now culturally, we consider these leaders to be ethical because of World War II. And that's why we have an ethical underpinning for our cultural definition of leaders. Not necessarily the dictionary definition of leadership, but what they call, based on cultural context, the connotative term for leadership implies ethics, just as the connotative term for power within the United States tends to lean towards unethical. Okay, so we are going to look at the basic history of social power. Now, the power dynamics that we're going to talk about today were created by John French and Bertrand Raven. They're out of the University of Michigan, and they are the authors of the article Basis of Social Power back in 1959. This is the seminal work that started all of this. I actually had a professor that studied under them. Interesting individual. I think she's passed now, but nice person. Anyways, they were the start of all of this, and they came up with 5 different power dynamics. So the sources of power are legitimate power, reward power, coercive power, expert power, and referent power. Forgive me, I'm moving things around on my screen so I can see my notes in the background here. Okay, legitimate power comes from the organization. The very nature of a leader's position offers power over others. A follower is likely to act upon requests because of this hierarchical relationship, which comes with the understanding of a leader's formal position and role as representing the organization's interest until and unless proven otherwise. So an example of a legitimate, someone with legitimate power would be your boss, your direct supervisor, the CEO of a company, a general, an NCOIC in a military organization. Let's see. So these are the type of people. Anybody that has power based on the organization. Now remember, this power can go across any type of organization, not just companies, not just military, not any kind of organization. An organization is anything where you get just a couple of people that are working together for the same vision, to accomplish the same vision. So this could be for a Girl Scout troop, a church group, anything. Somebody within that organization could wield legitimate power. And that's important to remember as we go along, that this applies to any organization. Reward power. This comes from the ability to reward followers. Reward power is one of the hard forms of power and comes from the leader's ability to reward followers. Beyond having a higher position in an organization, A manager can influence an employee through raises, bonuses, and other incentives. The ability to reward also translates into the ability to withhold rewards. So this source of power can be used in both positive and negative manners. Like legitimate power, reward power is based on the person's position in the organization. So again, this comes back to someone like your boss, your manager, somebody that signs your paycheck. This is the reward for you doing your job. If you are working for a nonprofit, maybe you were a volunteer. Somebody within the organization has the ability to reward your labor with a nice token, maybe a dinner out someplace. They can offer you something of value that you find of value that you're willing to follow this person to achieve this reward. So this is how they can influence you, is through rewards. Coercive power. This is based on the ability to punish and reward and withhold rewards. So coercive power is another type of hard power and is based on the leader's authority to punish, threaten, use force, and withhold rewards. Not following a leader or manager could result in a warning or potentially even a firing. This source of power also stems from the organization and the systems of reward and punishment that are built into the hierarchy. So, as the name implies, the individual that's wielding coercive power is holding something over you. This is not necessarily an ethical form of power. They have some way to coerce you into doing their bidding. This could simply be blackmail, that they're blackmailing you into doing something. And you're doing it because there's nothing you can do to fight against it. So this tends to be a very dark form of power, versus a more ethical form of power where you do something more or less voluntarily, and not being coerced to do it. Expert power, based on expertise and experience. Now, expert power is the first of the personal sources of power, and as such, it's also an example of soft power. Expert power is based on a leader's experience and expertise. A leader who knows a particular field and is a domain expert can influence employees. Example of this may include managing partner at a law firm or a senior engineer at a biotech company who reached the position through years of education and professional experience. Followers also have expert power and can influence leaders and managers from their knowledge. Now, at this point, it's important to note that you have legitimate leaders that are, like the legitimate power where they're assigned by the power of the organization to be a leader, but you also have informal group leaders. And informal group leaders can wield expert power. An example of this came from a dissertation I read years ago, and it was about a janitor at a K-12 public school system in Kansas. It was a little tiny school system someplace. Excuse me. And they got a new superintendent in, and he treated this janitor, pretty shabbily. But this janitor had been with the school system for approaching 30 years and knew where the skeletons were, so to speak. Knew everything about the organization, all the infrastructure, the boilers, all the sewer systems and the plumbing and everything. Well, the school system had a big project coming up, and the plans that they needed were long gone for something that nobody had a clue where any of this infrastructure was that they needed to find for this this project. Well, the janitor knew where it was at. The janitor could answer the questions. He could help the engineers with the project by providing historical context and his expertise from being there for so many years. So that elevated his status with the new superintendent, and long story short, they lived happily ever after. But that is an example of expert power. The lowly janitor compared to this supervisor, school superintendent, was able to wield expert power because of his experience working with the organization. Referent power. Now, this is an interesting one. Referent power is personal charisma. Referent power is another form of personal power that is based on personality and personal characteristics. Employees esteem the leader and will follow out of admiration or general regard. Charismatic leaders, in particular, excel through referent power. In some ways, this source of power is the opposite of coercive power. Followers are influenced by truths rather than, or by trust rather than fear or warnings of retribution. Referent power remains a major source of leadership influence. So referent power is such a big deal that there's actually a leadership style that's named for this, charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders use their charisma. They're able to influence just out of the sheer power of their will, their charm, good nature, and ability to talk people into doing their bidding. Now, this is another area where referent power does not have to be, the term is ethically neutral. You can have unethical charismatic leaders or ethical charismatic leaders. An example of an ethical charismatic leader would be General Colin Powell. Phenomenal individual, highly trustworthy. People followed him and without question. An unethical charismatic leader is Adolf Hitler. There is no doubt he was charismatic. He was able to take and talk an entire country into taking on the world. The difference between the two leaders is their ethics. They both are highly charismatic. They both are able to use the sheer power of their charisma to get people to follow them. But they had different ethical standards. And this is something to remember when you're looking at power, is the nature of the leaders' ethics and how they use their ethics to wield their power. Okay, back to the question again. Why is understanding power so important? And again, we come back to, you need to know why you want to follow this individual and what kind of power do they have over you to entice you to follow them. And they may have nothing over you at all. They may have no power over you whatsoever, and so you may be able to just walk away from the situation and save yourself a lot of trouble. So I'll give you an example. Years ago, I did some volunteer work for a local nonprofit. And I'd go in once in a while and do a little something, a little maintenance maybe. I'd been asked to they'd had the woods logged, and they'd asked me to clear some of the wood out of the back. And I said, sure, I'll do that because I could use the firewood. I live in Michigan. It's cold here, so firewood's excellent to have. So I would haul that out. Well, and I'd do some other little chores, and suddenly I found myself nominated and on the list for board of directors. I have no idea where that came from. I didn't ask to be put on there. I was just put on there, and lo and behold, I was suddenly on the board of directors. I didn't ask for it. and I definitely didn't do it, because I went down through the list and I looked at why should I do this? What do they have to hold over me to do this? Did they have legitimate power over me? No, this was a nonprofit. It was a volunteer position I was doing on a rare occasion when I felt like it. Did they have reward power? Well, if I wanted the firewood, I could, clean the woods out, but that had nothing to do with me becoming a director. Coercive power. They didn't have anything to coerce me into doing it, except maybe they were trying to guilt me into doing it, but I didn't let that happen. Expert power. Well, no, I didn't want to follow them for their expertise in anything. And charisma. Well, they kind of blew their charisma when they just all of a sudden put me on the board of directors. So I ended up leaving the board that I never wanted to be on in the first place. And so I got out of that, saved myself a lot of trouble. So this is an example of how you can use power to get out of something, or that you don't want to do, that these people hold no sway over you. Or you can look at why you want to follow these people. Maybe the individual that you want to follow is an expert in a topic that you really want to study. So you follow this person and you help them out and you learn, and they may serve as a mentor or a coach for you to help you with your career. Somebody may have legitimate power over you, so you follow them because they give you an order to do so because of their position. So you walk through these different power dynamics and determine why you need to follow these people. And this can help you through the rest of your career. And with that is all I have today. So I thank you very much for inviting me to speak again.